Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast.
That's the thing. I scored last week, first time, and
You were on a roll.
I know. I was like, yeah, I was
You were on a
really
point streak, weren't you?
Yeah, it was, pretty much a point a game for one game.
That's an incredible point streak.
Yeah, and then it all came crashing down.
I'm sorry to hear that, buddy.
Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of our Barber's Brief. If you're a new listener, we use this forum to discuss what's caught our eye in the news over the last couple of weeks. We like to highlight a marketing moment and, of course, ad of the week. Now, this one's a little bit different because we kind of wanted to acknowledge a lot of the chaos that has been over the last, 6 days, maybe-ish.
Yeah, something like that. That's fair.
You know, given the tariff announcements over the weekend, we decided to make a special edition, and those have obviously changed already. So this, at time of recording, we're going to share what we know today, the potential impacts it has on, not only on business, but also on the marketing lens by applying the 4P methodology, just to kind of give a lay of the land for everyone that's listening.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is going to be practical commentary, not political. And just here to help.
Mm-hmm.
Hey?
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
And if anybody else as you're listening to this, have ideas and suggestions, love to hear them. Like, this would be really interesting to build some
100%.
conversation around and best practices around. You want to kick it off for you, or you want
Sure.
me to go?
I can kick it off.
Sure.
So just a brief overview of what's transpired over the last, 6 days, really. So it was on Saturday, February 1st, President Trump signed an executive order issuing tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China. 25% of most products from Canada and Mexico was one of the biggest headlines, if you will, which it just so happens that Canada and Mexico are of two of the United States' most, largest partners, trade partners.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had a free trade agreement in place since, 1994, if I'm not mistaken?
Like that. Yeah.
There was a 10% tariff on Canadian energy and then just a 10% blanket tariff on China.
Mm-hmm.
On Sunday, February 2nd, just to show how fluid this all is, Canada and Mexico announced similar size retaliatory tariffs on imports from the U.S. So, 25% again from Canada to anything that's coming into the country, and then the similar from Mexico's side. China on February 2nd also announced that it's going to file a lawsuit with the World Trade Organization and would soon announce countermeasures. On Monday, February 3rd, tariffs put on hold for 30 days for both for both Canada and Mexico, and agreed to plans that enhance their border security. Now, fairness, the border security issuance from Canada was in place since sometime in 2024. So it's, I think we as a country invested over $1.3 billion on border security. And even as of this morning of recording, so this is Tuesday, February 4th, the EU has been put on notice by President Trump, and China has stipulated retaliatory tariffs of their own. So this is, there's a lot going on here, and I'm not here to, like we said, we're not here to provide political commentary and things like that. But it is a really interesting in the moment case study that we can look at and showcase, what are those downward effects on things like on not only the business side, but also on the marketing side. Mm-hmm. I think this is where I turn it over to you, Mark.
Yeah, so the way we kind of broke this down is looking at the 4 Ps, so product, place, price, and promotion. And so there's a little bit of insight from different places that we're pulling this all from. So there's a global news story in response to the original tariffs that a whole bunch of Canadian provinces and stores and organizations are going to start pulling things from the U.S.-made products from the shelves.
Right.
Specifically, liquor was a big one that kept getting notice or press coverage. Like as an example, and this is all redundant now because I think for the next 30 days at least, it sounds like this is not going to happen. So they'll restock the shelves. But Ontario, Manitoba, British Columbia, and Nova Scotia at least were pulling products from the shelves. There's pictures of, buy Canada instead or something like that on a lot of the shelves. For Ontario, that represented about $1 billion worth of revenue for U.S. brands, which, relatively speaking, is probably, at best 10% of their revenue.
Yep.
So,
It's a drop
we're
in the bucket.
relatively speaking small in terms of our size, but it's not a
Yep.
small amount of money to have to account for. So from marketers on both sides of the border, I think there's, as is the case with Nike pulling back from the retail partners as they went more to D2C
Yep.
and removing a lot of product and limiting distribution to retail partners. This new shelf space creates opportunities for a lot of local brands. So I think there's a lot of cool things that local brands could work on, and potentially finding new international partners to fill those
Totally.
shelf spaces. So I think that's an interesting opportunity. It's not a way to fix the product gap that exists in the short term, but I do think it takes a little bit of time, probably for new product development, or for scouring and finding new products that just already exist, and just bringing in more of that to a shelf space. So there's an opportunity there for marketers, probably even to do some more social listening, to do some market research,
Totally.
to bring some of those insights in as to what kinds of products could be alternatives.
I really like that example that you brought forward with Nike, pulling out of the retail stores or limiting their inventory to retail stores, and it just created this onslaught of Hoka, On, and Brooks came back out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
And consumers just, they didn't change their habits. They kept going to those retail stores. So when you think about something like this, consumers are savvy enough, they'll just find new products. And if, everyone is, when you think about like the Canadiana that really came out of the weekend, and as these tariffs were going to come into effect, I think you felt this national pride, and that they were going to be prioritizing Canadian products very quickly. So any sort of mental availability, anything that they've been able to, any brands have been able to capture over time, was thrown out the window just by nature of, now became almost a conversation of like us versus them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's probably true on the U.S. side too for, a lot of the brands there. I mean, having a made in U.S. is like some kind of asset, distinctive asset on the packaging, that kind of thing is equally as powerful for them to showcase that the product is made there and take advantage of some of that, I would call it probably selection criteria that people might have when they're at the store shelf.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
How about place?
Okay, so for this is from the Foreign Council of Foreign Relations. So obviously with tariffs in place, there's a whole bunch of immediate implications for Canada and for Mexico, also potentially for the EU and all the countries there. UK might fit into this category. Who knows? We'll find out later. But suddenly there's new procurement logistics supply. I would imagine that Canada and Mexico had some really immediate short-term talks around, how can we support one another in this 100%. Situation, and trying to find workarounds. In the case of China, we just discovered this really, I'd never heard of this before, but the Brick and Road or Belt and Road Initiative, which is a version of the new Silk Road. So they've been at this for 10 years, which I just find is fascinating from a strategy point of view.
Yeah, totally.
Their idea around getting to market, and they're geographically not as fortunate as, say, Canada and US, because we're not physically tied to the largest consumer country on the planet. But they've been at this project for 10 years where they've invested, I'm hazarding to guess, but trillions probably of dollars into infrastructure projects to make new roads, to make new railways, to make new ports where they can have this massive deployment and development of new shipping ports and railways and whatnot to get the product from China to places like Europe and Africa and Oceania and Latin America. So, and the end result, which is to broaden China's economic and political influence. And so it's, to me, just a fascinating long game. And when you think about the Roger Martin playing the wind cascade, getting Chinese products to market, great.
Yep.
You can even take the end result of China's economic and political influence as a winning aspiration. But then there's a whole bunch of things that need to fall, that have to be true. So like the where to play stuff, if they
Totally.
want to play in those other countries, well, then one of the supporting capabilities and management systems is some kind of infrastructure pathway to get to these places to bring the product to market. So I just find that fascinating, and thinking about a long-term vision to support some of the product distribution and the whole thing around supply chain
Totally.
is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And I, like you, had never heard of this Silk Road or the Belt and Road Initiative until I saw it here in our outline today, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting to see how far China's taking a lot of the infrastructure and their ability to, I don't want to say, I guess you could almost call it like reducing that friction from like manufacturer to get it to the shelves or
Mm-hmm.
whatnot, because the biggest lure to use China is the cost of manufacturing, and you could get it shipped to said country
Mm-hmm.
cheaper than you could manufacture it locally, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
always been the biggest thing. And they're just doubling down on that, making it
Yeah.
even easier, investing in this infrastructure to do so, which I think is really interesting to see. Not only how embedded China is in a lot of the economies of the world, but how, I guess, not certain, but how aggressive they are in continuing to make sure that they have that stronghold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
All right, price.
Okay, so this is from Fox News. I was trying to find balance because I didn't want to have all of one source, and so
Yeah.
Fox News was a good place to go for this. So the report from there was that businesses will pay the tariffs, but the increased costs will be passed along to customers in a couple of different ways. One, through direct costs. So just the example, and the one example I keep seeing all the time coming up is Super Bowl's coming up. So Corona
Right.
and then avocados for the guacamole, prices of those things would go up right away in all likelihood because of the tariffs.
Yep.
And so there's direct costs in terms of grocery, toys, appliances, automotive, home construction, utilities, gas pumps, phones, laptops. I mean, it's a massive list
Oh my
of things that
goodness.
would go up in price. Then there's indirect costs, which economists are predicting that there would be an increase in inflation again with a tariff structure like this. Now we prepped this yesterday.
Yeah,
This
totally.
morning this is different. So who knows what will happen a few days from now? But price being what it is, it's really, I think it's important, and we're going to talk about in the ad of the week something that we found from Kraft, actually from the
Yeah.
30s.
Yeah.
But I do think price is a lever that marketers can definitely have more influence on than what I think we give ourselves credit for. And it's not just about discounting; it's about
Totally.
communicating value.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to counterpunch in the way price increases, and these are price increases that you can't always control, but there are times probably when a lot of marketers do want to have an influence in increasing price by increasing the perceived value of a product. So
Right.
I think that's another one.
Yeah. I think it just really comes down to that notion of pricing power, right? How you are able to retain value, even in these economies, to still make it, this is a product that's really important regardless of, if the price has gone up or not. So again, there's some brands that do this really well. Other
Totally.
brands not so well, but it's an interesting one to keep a pulse on.
Yeah.
And finally, promotion.
So promotion. So this is the thing I think we should have learned from COVID. So this is an article from Marketing Week from Mark Ritson.
Yeah.
So the quote here is that there's probably no reason to ditch your old creative because of coronavirus. But if you do, your new ads need to be distinctive and avoid the bland cliches that brands are currently churning out. So that idea around we're all in this together, like it seemed
Totally.
that COVID, everybody flipped
Oh my gosh.
right away. And it was almost, it felt like if you didn't do that, you were doing something wrong.
That's
it was almost
true.
like a benchmarking kind of exercise. Well, they're doing that, then we got to do that.
That's a great point.
Yeah. And in so doing, a lot of people spent tons of money saying we're all in this together, but then made their ads so generic you couldn't discern one brand thing from another brand thing. And then you're at the same time you're still spending money in an unpredictable scenario
Totally.
where the money that you're spending then is less of it is going towards building those brand memories between your brand and the buying triggers that actually are reasons why people are buying your product. So then you're almost in a way like disintegrating, if that's the right, it's not the right choice of word, but you're deteriorating
That's a better
the
word.
memory links.
Yeah,
Just by switching and flipping to this whole, like, we're all in this together kind of messaging.
totally.
So then I think the other thing here that just to bring back the point you brought up, V, is like the distinctive brand assets are really, really important for brand managers and organizations. And to your point, I think, thinking about a Canadian flag, if you're in Canada, putting that on your product, or American flag, and if you're that way, I think even so much as I think I swear this is true. Maybe check me on this. But in the NFL, I think they have flags of the countries that the people like. If you and I were playing in the NFL, we would have a little Canadian flag on our helmet.
I think you're right. Yeah,
I think I've seen that. Like little things like
Little
that would be
things.
really interesting. Yeah, and then the other part around don't throw out your product positioning, I think is really important. It's still really important and valuable to build memory triggers, especially in a scenario where if all of a sudden everything's getting a lot more expensive,
yeah,
people are going to start taking longer amounts of time to make decisions, which means that you're going to have to be a bit more patient on sales. And so longer term memories and linking the brands becomes really important because it's probably a smaller percentage of people are going to be buying today than there were yesterday.
Applying that localized lens, and by local I mean, and this can apply to any country, right? So like you said, it could be in the United States, you're adding an American flag and, really knowing that you're supporting an American company. Same thing for Canada, same thing in Europe as well. It's like, this is from Europe. It's a very small thing, but in a moment like this, and if a trade war were to transpire, because we don't know in 30 days how things kind of play out, it will affect consumer choice, and you want to be positioned in those moments or be ready for that. And I would argue a lot of consumers on both sides of the border right now, if we're just talking about North America, are already preemptively trying to think of, like, we want to make sure we're supporting local more than maybe we have in the past.
For sure.
So I do anticipate there to be a small change.
Yeah.
Now, how long that stays in effect is to be determined. But it's thinking about your distinctive assets. How can you make it easier for the consumer to really acknowledge or understand the point of origin, for example, could go a long way. And again, if a trade war were to break out and now you're just not really repositioning, now you're looking for more shelf space in the grocery stores, electronics. But like I said, this is a very fluid circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, we'll continue to keep everyone updated on the downward effect that something like this would have on the business and marketing community.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll talk a little bit about this in the case studies too, which I'm just about to pull up. But I do think there's, I think, people talk about whether the 4 Ps are useful or not. Just as a comment about that, I do think they're super useful.
I 100% believe they are.
It's at least a framework to run through if you're wondering what to do on something. And then you can look at the levers that exist to help drive organizations. I think, for what it's worth, like, we marketers often will believe that we can, put an ad out and make change happen immediately. When you think about it, there's, whatever the number is today, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 ads that a person is exposed to. We don't buy all those things.
Nope.
Right. And so people have agency, people have choice, how we influence that choice. There's lots of things that we can do. But I think also on the other hand is not to overpromise. Like if stuff is gone from the shelf, you can't sell it.
You can't
It
sell it.
doesn't matter how much advertising you put in the market.
It's the balance between mental and physical availability.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm going to try and share this here, B. So, as luck would have it, so WARC recently came out with the multiplier effect, which is just loaded with great stuff.
Loaded.
So, chapeau, WARC.
It's phenomenal.
And some of it is like, not some of it, a lot of it is very relevant to these kind of moments. So we're just going to share a couple of things that were there. I don't know if you've had much chance to read through this, V, or if you wanted to comment on any of it.
Honestly, like I think it's not only is it very timely, when it's actually circulated at work as well. So it's a really interesting use case and understanding of the balance between performance and brand. Unlike anything we've seen before, I think there's always been that. I guess in behind our heads, like these are additive. They're together. They're not one or the other. But I think this study does an incredible job at actually showcasing why it's important and how you can make it so. So yeah, it's a great marketing moment that you'll be highlighting. So
yeah. So and the brand investment spectrum, there's a whole bunch of things in the report that talks about what the impact is of going all in on performance, which is a moment now where you would naturally tend towards more performance marketing, because there's pressure very soon for a lot of us, I'm sure, to drive business impact now.
Yep.
Not next quarter, but now.
Yeah.
And so there's that kind of mindset, and so you tend towards the more lower funnel kind of things.
Yeah.
So there's a huge opportunity loss when you go all in on all in on performance marketing and exclude brand. So this brand investment spectrum is just a guide to help, and it's reminiscent of the 60-40 or mental and physical availability. There is definitely or the 595 rule. Like there's definitely an investment in short term, but you're also optimizing by investing in long term. There's also this there's two case studies we'll go to. This one, hotels.com. There's a great case study here where they talk about hotels.com was, post-pandemic, they're getting crushed by some big competitors. They had previously spent most of their budget was dedicated towards performance marketing. They had this insight that they could become a hotel curation experts and a matchmaker between travelers and the ideal hotel. So they built this platform called Flings, a series of commercials that were linking guests to a perfect destination. They ran a lot of that stuff on more traditional channels like TV, outdoor, cinema. And then they had these spontaneous travelers who were a part of their target segment, who could be helpful in driving short-term sales. So the idea of Flings became reality on digital video, more targeted towards those kind of younger buyers. They had a 4.2% uplift in net booking value in that period of time. Consideration scores went up among spontaneous travelers in the broader category. And then the company built on the same brand idea of matchmaking and with another series of creative platforms. So delivered great results, both in the short term and long term.
Yep.
By flipping away from exclusively looking at the short term.
Yep.
And then continuing to build on the platform of Flings with Perfect 10 and introduction. So there's like a long-term play here. Like, yes, you do want to deliver results in the short term, but you do also want to invest in the buyer for tomorrow and not forget them.
It's funny. This is going to sound weird, but taking that leap of faith shows some courage in an organization. And it's one of those things where it's very easy to look at performance marketing and driving that short term.
Yep.
But that pool can deteriorate very quickly if you're not looking for trying to add more growth to to your brand and things to that effect. So
Totally.
sometimes you can get yourself in this vicious cycle, short term.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll still be able to show revenue. And if you're reporting to the street, shareholder value, et cetera, you're cutting A&P, but you're still retaining performance. You're still able to show, oh, good, like we're doing well here.
Mm-hmm.
But that runway can run out fairly quickly. So you have to find that balance as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the other thing, the flip side of that would be, how do you know that your performance marketing is doing all the things you think it's doing?
Right.
Like, I don't know that you can always prove that either.
No.
If you can't prove brand, then you should be able to prove performance, but then you also can't prove that all the time.
No, that's a great point.
All
right. Second case study.
Yeah. So there's this really other interesting case study. So this is a company called Zen Business that was an online business registry.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was in the States. So right after the COVID, there's a whole bunch of moms that ended up having to take care of the families. And so a lot of them left work. And so they Zen Business recognized that as an opportunity for their brand.
Mm-hmm.
They had this idea of democratizing entrepreneurship was their sort of mission. So they still ran performance marketing, but they inserted the messaging of that democratizing entrepreneurship idea into a lot of their messaging. And it's sort of like this activist approach. So it was a free, what you would normally roll out as a free promotion, which is, register for free in this period of time, register your business for free, became branded through emotional language and whatnot, but through performance tactics.
Right.
And so what they ended up with was 450 million earned impressions, 20,000 leads that were engaging at 3x times the regular. They had over 1,000 incremental conversions, 78% increase in signups, and almost 50% decline in cost of acquisition.
Yeah.
And a giant lift in social comments. So there was, so the messaging was during COVID, 3.5 million mothers left the workforce. Now they'll transform it. So like that kind of thing is really interesting. It doesn't have to be giant brand campaigns that we perceive to cost tons of money and have to run on TV. Like there are ways to bake in some branding into just traditional, here's a free thing. Sign up now. 25% discount. Like it doesn't have to always be the positioning of the discount doesn't always have to be just the discount.
No, totally. And let's also, I would argue that there's this misconception that performance also can't help build brand, right? When you think about some of these,
that's a great point.
Bigger retail moments that happen, you think of the Black Fridays, the Cyber Mondays, etc. There's so much investment that's happening in the moment. If you look at your study, your focus groups and the studies that come off the heels of that, you can help increase your recall as well, even during those moments. Yeah. It's just about maintaining that in marketness, so to speak. And that's probably not the way of saying it, but having that frequency, the multiple touch points, and just being there consistently for the consumer will go a long way. So don't discount your retail moments or your discount moments as not helping continue to build brand as well, right? Yeah. Brand campaigns don't just build brand, right? Retail campaigns don't just sell.
Totally.
They both work both ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm just going to repeat the same things you said because I thought they're really good.
No, thanks, man.
It's true though. Like it isn't just a brand campaign. It isn't just performance marketing. It can be more than that, and it oftentimes is more than that when you can imagine it being something else.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, let me pull up this other one. So this is
amazing, by the way.
I'm just trying to set this up so that I can.
I wanted to try to set the stage for you in the context of like how do I say this, like we're back in the 30s, but I'm struggling to find that connection. But like,
okay. Well,
this is the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Travel back. The Wayback Machine.
There's some gloomy moments when I was looking for research on what other moments in time have happened when there's been a tariff. And then there's the giant tariff that led to the Great Depression. So I won't go into that. But one of the ads that I found from that period of time I thought was really interesting. So, because I think there's things to learn. And so Kraft Mayonnaise, this is we've got this on the video. So if anybody's listening to this, you can go to YouTube and check out the ad. But this is an print ad from the 30s. There's a whole bunch of things that I was really captivated by in this.
This is incredible.
Yeah. So now try this fresh mayonnaise. It's always kitchen fresh. It's weird. They've got this weird thing about it's fresh as a new peeled orange. I don't know why they make this.
I've never seen mayonnaise and oranges in the same picture before. So I think that's interesting.
It's a weird one. But delivered by fast service cars to stores and shops every week. And then there's some copy underneath that. And in the copy, it's got some stuff about a recipe, ways to use it. It's also, it used to be owned by a company called Gelfand, and now it's bought and purchased and delivered by Kraft.
What don't we see in this ad though, Mark?
Video?
No. Price.
Yeah, totally.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. So that was the thing I thought was really interesting. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's in this ad. And again, different time, different medium, but not really that much different in some ways for like the amount of things you can put into a short video. You can communicate a lot of imagery or messages just with the really short video. But yeah, you're right. Price. There's no price in here.
Nothing.
Delivery service, talks about their delivery service to stores and shops every week.
We're going to get it into your house.
There's a guaranteed freshness about it. So that there's a guarantee there. And their guarantee also extends to from the brand to the grocers to say that for consumers, you're always going to have fresh mayonnaise. I don't know why mayonnaise wouldn't be fresh. It must have been a thing back then.
Well, even if you apply like the lens of the promise to the customer here, I would argue it's very clearly laid out. Like there's a supply chain conversation here that's happening. It's going to be delivered fast by those really quick service cars to stores up every week. So you're guaranteeing that freshness, right? So the promise is like, we're going to make sure you have the freshest mayonnaise in your home because we're delivering it to your local shop. And I think for me, even though this is not an ad that would fly today in the context of like how it's been put together and things to that effect, there's elements of this that still apply today.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bit of a recipe around like, it's hard to read this, but they, pairing it. It sounds like wine. Using it on salads and things like that. Maybe that's where the orange peel comes from. I don't know. Maybe orange salad was a big deal back in the day. I don't know. But yeah, like it's a really interesting ad for a whole bunch of reasons. It's not just about the short term. They're probably, in my mind, especially with mayonnaise, because you might have some in the fridge already, if that's where they stored it, or in the shelf if that's where they stored it. And so there's this natural cycle of a buying pattern where you would be going maybe months or at least weeks between purchases.
Totally.
So to put an ad out with just a price point, that really restricts the number of people who are going to pay attention to the ad. So they may actually be looking at, I remember Pickles doing something like this once.
Oh, that's a good point.
Where they're like, they're in there somewhere. And it was just the idea of using the pickles so that, because they're probably hidden in the back of your fridge.
Totally.
Anyway, I just thought it was a really interesting ad. You don't always have to go for discounts to have meaningful messages.
No. Just make sure it's kitchen fresh.
It's a weird line, but whatever.
I mean, like it does the job though.
Yeah.
Like I said, like apply that promise to the customer lens to this. It tracks.
Totally.
It tracks. Okay.
What do we got coming up, V?
What do we have coming up? Well, we have a few options here actually on what's coming up next week. But one thing we can say for sure, it's going to be our first episode in our creative series. We have two kind of in the works right now. It will either be Vanessa Chin, SVP of Marketing at System One. It's going to come and talk to us about Super Bowl ads. So we're going to go through the System One framework and just kind of do a little show and tell, if you will, on some of the Super Bowl ads as everyone gets ready for the big game. Or we'll be running Karen Pierce and Morgan Tierney from Rethink Canada. That really kind of speaks to how you take the chaos out of creative, which is really exciting as well. So one of those 2 episodes will air next week.
Yeah. And the CMO series, we've also got an episode coming up with Paul Durbin, head of brand at Miro, where we had a really great conversation about evidence-based marketing approaches, brand management for SaaS companies, and then ended up getting into a really great conversation about AI tools. I was furiously writing all the tools down that he's recommending. So there's that.
Yeah.
The measurement series we've got coming up. There's lots of stuff coming up. There's so many great episodes we've got coming up.
Yeah, it's really good. Really exciting.
Yeah. And with that, awesome. I think given all the tariffs and whatnot, I definitely am going to go look for some profitability.
Yeah. Are you going to go to like the mayonnaise section or what?
I'm going to start at the store shelf for sure.
Store shelf. Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to go to the grocery store and see what I can find in the profitability aisle.
Yeah. I mean, sun's coming up now. So I think I'm kind of in the same boat.
Yeah.
Snowing.
Oh, yeah.
So I can't go to like my profitability tree anymore. But...
Yeah. I might have to look for a profitability car starter to see if my car will actually start in this cold.
That's amazing.
Okay, Betty.
That's awesome. Have a
great day.
Until
next time.
Thank you for keeping us in your ears.
Yeah. All right. Take it easy.